the air with breaking news from a courtroom in Connecticut and the absolutely staggering amount of money that conspiracy theorist Alex Jones is now going to have to pay, about $1 billion, to 8 Sandy Hook families and an FBI agent because of Jones's years of lies about the massacre. The reaction we're getting from those families and from Jones, whose legal issues are not even close to being over yet. Plus, President Biden out west doing some policy, doing some politics as voters start voting, including in Arizona, with election deniers at the top of the Republican ticket. We'll take you there live. We're also bringing you an exclusive interview with one of Vladimir Putin's right-hand men, what he's telling our team about whether his boss is a rational actor, like President Biden says. Plus, tonight's forecast, it's calling for purple rain. How a case involving the artist formerly known as Prince and the artist still known as Andy Warhol is giving us a rare fanboy moment at the Supreme Court. And with the business world worried about a recession, we pull back the curtain on how business leaders navigate tricky moments like these, specifically women leaders. And one of our reporters joins us in the backstory with what happens when women lead later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right before we came on the air, we saw a jury deciding that conspiracy theorist Alex Jones will have to pay nearly $1 billion to families connected to the Sandy Hook school shooting because of Jones' lies about the horrific massacre there in 2012. Jones has since acknowledged it's not true that the shooting was a hoax. Obviously, it was not. And you can see here, I want to show you, look at this, families of those victims who have been through hell, obviously emotional, understandably, as this verdict is read. It's been a long journey for them. With the trial, including testimony from families of 8 of the Sandy Hook victims, describing how Jones's lies made the nightmare they were already living that much worse. Here's what they had to say outside court after the verdict.
Everybody that took the stand told the truth except for one.
And in this big moment, like in every big moment, since the shooting, I wish I could just call my mom and tell her about it.
People like Alex Jones will have to rethink what they say.
This is sending the right message that people are good and that good does prevail.
This decision comes after a 3-week trial in Waterbury, Connecticut, less than 20 miles from Newtown, where the shooting happened, where 20 kids and 6 staff members were murdered. Jones was actually on the air. He was on his show when this verdict came in. He was learning about how much you'd have to pay in real time, telling his viewers they want to scare us away. He says, we're not going to stop. The verdict came after 17 hours of deliberations. Ever since closing arguments wrapped up last week, lawyers for the families said Jones and his company cashed in on lies about the shooting, while families had to face years of harassment and death threats from his followers. Rahima Ellis is joining us now. And Rahima, it is a $965 million, is a ton of money. Our reporting, and from colleagues and experts we've talked to, Jones probably doesn't have it, right? It is significant, it is extraordinary, it is potentially historic here.
Yeah, and potentially crippling to Alex Jones. And he always said that that was the intention of these families, to put him off the air and to silence him. But they said that was not their intention. That was to, they say their intention was to make him, to hold him responsible for the lies that he told about what happened at Sandy Hook, lies that they say began the very day that the massacre took place. You pointed out that there was more than 17 hours of deliberation. This verdict came on the 3rd day of deliberation. It was a unanimous verdict by the jurors, the 6-member panel, 3 men, 3 women, who had a tough time, it seemed. They had several questions for the court about how do we decide a dollar value here. They wanted to hear testimony read back to them or played back to them of one of the family members in this particular case. And all of that happened over, we said, like the last 3 days. So when they came back today, this afternoon, it was a time of relief. You saw in the video leading up to this, some family members literally shoulders shaking as they're sobbing in relief of what has been a long journey from the day that their loved ones died to this day when they're asking for someone, Alex Jones, to be responsible for lying about it.
Talk to us more about that emotion, Rahima, because it was so compelling, I think, watching these family members. You know, they're obviously never going to... They would never, I'm sure every single one of them would give up every penny and more to get their family members back, right? Incredibly emotional moment. And to center them is really important here.
Absolutely, Hallie. They would give it all back to be able to put their arms around their children and their ones that they loved. And one of the things we heard in the courtroom was from people talking about how damaging this was to them over these years. This has gone on for years. Remember, Sandy Hook happened in December of 2012. So we're talking about 3 years of torment for these families. I'm struck by one father who got on the stand and talked about followers of Alex Jones were going to his son's gravesite and threatening to dig up the gravesite to prove that there was no child in the coffin. And the father talking about, you can hardly imagine what it's like for me. And for him, he said, I almost have no words to explain what that means. Others talking about how close they were to their children, and one woman talking about her sister who was a teacher who was killed, that they were the best of friends, and how heartbreaking it is to her that she can no longer communicate with her. This was a very difficult trial to hear all of this. We should mention that Alex Jones did not sit through it. He didn't want to hear all of it. In fact, he even left Connecticut before deliberations began. And his side didn't put on a defense. They called no witnesses, including Alex Jones. He appeared on the stand one time, and that was when he was being directly questioned by the plaintiffs, by the attorney for the families. And he then left. He didn't want to hear what these families had to say. So when one of the families in the clip that you played coming out of the courtroom said everyone on that who took the witness stand told the truth except one, he was referring to Alex Jones. He said Alex Jones was not telling the truth.
You know, Jones's attorney has promised to appeal here. They say they're going to keep fighting this, but Jones also has a third trial coming up. We covered the one that was about 6 weeks ago. There was this one, huge, huge number. And now there's another trial coming up in just really a few weeks from now in Texas.
Yeah, it is. This will be the third trial of this nature, and Alex Jones has a lot of legal trouble against him. You mentioned Texas, now this one, and the one coming up. There's appeals expected in all of these, no matter what. His troubles are far from over as far as legal troubles are concerned. Hallie?
Rahema Ellis, live for us with the story, breaking again in just the last hour or so. Rahema, thank you so much. Right now, President Biden is heading to Los Angeles. The next stop on his swing through the West. He's out on the campaign trail here less than 4 weeks ahead of the midterms. I want to show you him just an hour or so ago in Colorado to celebrate his first national monument. But he's also there in Colorado to stand with Senator Michael Bennet, who's up for re-election. And you may be thinking, well, wait a second. He's in Colorado. Okay. But Senator Bennet, look at this polling, doesn't need all that much help. He's leading his competitor there, the Republican in this race, by something like 9 points. You might be thinking, would the president go somewhere where there's a closer Senate race, like perhaps maybe Arizona? Well, look at the president's approval rating there. It is 39%. That's lower than the national average. And when you talk about Arizona, mail-in ballots go out today. Voters are getting ready to vote, people. It's happening. Keep in mind, this is a state that historically votes by mail and votes early. It is also a state with 3 Republican election deniers on the ballot, including Kari Lake right here. She's on the right. Lake was supposed to debate her Democratic opponent, Katie Hobbs, tonight. But Hobbs says she's not down with this. She's telling our Andrea Mitchell why in just the last few hours. Watch.
How do you debate someone who refuses to accept the truth, who doesn't live in facts?
We're going to talk about what the president's up to with Kelly O'Donnell in just a second, but let's go live to Phoenix first with Vaughn Hilliard. And Vaughn, you are, I believe, at the Maricopa County Elections Department where those mail-in ballots will be counting. You've got some new reporting on Katie Hobbs and her supporters. Tell us about it.
Right, there's frustration among folks who are supportive of Katie Hobbs here. Not only Democratic activists, but also the likes of folks that even including a former John McCain advisor here, who said that he was looking to support Hobbs and was looking to help how he could, but was waiting for her, in his words, to lead, and that she had not here. I think the skipping of the debate is just one example. I mean, we have had, this is just one example and an anecdote, but over the course of the last week, we have had multiple Kari Lake events, opportunities to cover these events here. Katie Hobbs' schedule has been light, and it's been noticed by those folks who have been closest to her here. But you also don't see the likes of Mark Kelly or Kirsten Sinema on the campaign trail with her. She's not even running on the campaign trail with the Secretary of State, Adriana Fontes, the Democrat who is running to take the seat that she currently holds here. There are questions as she is going to be slated to be outspent by the Republicans backing Kari Lake here in this race. There are a lot of question marks around Katie Hobbs while the polling is still yet close. They feel like there's a missed opportunity here.
Arizona has really close races here, right? You've got the latest polling averages. You talked about it with Mark Kelly, for example, a slim lead on Blake Masters. You said Lake and Hobbs. They're basically 50-50. I mean, they're in the margin of error. And this is driving the conversation you had with Arizona's current governor, Doug Ducey, who now supports both Blake and Masters, which is different from what he did in the primary election. Help us understand that.
Right, he endorsed and helped and stumped for her primary opponent there. And ultimately, Kari Lake won that primary. And he is the chairman of the Republican Governors Association and sort of tacitly endorsed her by okaying the funneling of millions of dollars to back her candidacy. But it was finally was able to get him on camera yesterday where I put the question directly to him because he came under the ire of not only her, but Donald Trump for certifying the 2020 election. And she has called for the decertification of it. Take a listen to our exchange. Doesn't it give you pause knowing that the threat that denying and not certifying an election would pose? You stood there against the pressure and did not back down. Kari Lake has said that she would decertify the 2020 election.
The primary's over. I have every confidence that our elections will maintain their integrity going forward.
And Hallie, I already told you about the Democrats' lack of campaigning together. Compare that to the Republican side. Not only does she have Doug Ducey on her side, but you also see her campaigning with the likes of Senate candidate Blake Masters, who's taking on Mark Kelly, as well as the Republican candidates for Secretary of State and Attorney General. This is a Republican Party that is coalesced around this slate of Donald Trump-endorsed candidates here in the state.
Vaughn Hilliard live for us there in Phoenix. Vaughn, thank you. Let's turn to Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. And what's interesting, Kelly, as Vaughn talks about the landscape in Arizona, President Biden has frequently cast the upcoming elections as a fight to protect and preserve democratic norms and ideals. He's talked about it as a fight to protect, for example, access to reproductive rights. He has cast this in sort of big, sweepy terms, saying how, like, the onus is on the voter here to go out and make what he believes are good decisions at the ballot box. And now, while he's out in Colorado, yeah, he's doing some policy, Kelly, but he's also doing some politicking. He's trying to show support for Senator Bennett as Democrats are looking to keep control of the Senate.
He is, and yet it is sort of an eye of the beholder moment, because as you will understand, this was an official visit, meaning White House business, going to Colorado, where he named the first national monument of his presidency. And it has the political benefit of allowing space for Senator Michael Bennet, who's also been a proponent of making Camp Hale in the Continental Divide this special national monument, to have sort of the reflected attention of the president visiting. And so that does carry political benefit, but it's not a campaign event in terms of who pays for it and how is it structured.
He's not going out there for a fundraising rally.
Exactly.
That kind of thing. Right.
Fundraising is part of the West Coast swing, however. And when you have a president whose approval rating, as you pointed out, is not as strong as Democrats would like, one way he can be helpful is to get into the room with big dollar donors, because they have the ability to help the party, and the president is always popular in those settings. And so he can do some of that in a way that really fortifies the party by bringing out the biggest donors who want to have that direct personal access with the president. And we know that the president speaks his mind in these settings, because we heard about those comments he made in New York last week about Armageddon and Putin and the nuclear threat. So it can be worth someone's money if they want to have that exposure to the president. In addition, he is doing some overtly political events. We'll see him with the New York mayoral candidate Karen Bass during his time in California. But a West Coast swing for this president is something we haven't seen a lot of, and it will have the benefit of some good politics, some fundraising, and some official White House business along the way. Hallie?
Kelly O'Donnell covering it all for us tonight from the White House North Lawn. Kelly, good to see you. Thank you. We know that the economy, cost of living, jobs are a big reason why voters go to vote in the first place. And today we're getting some key pieces of info on the economy today, after President Biden suggested he doesn't think a recession is coming, but if it does, it will be very slight. He said that on CNN, and it's kind of a different tone from what we've been hearing from other experts about what could come next in the broader American economic picture. One key piece of data we're getting now is the Producer Price Index. If you don't know what that is, join the club. It's basically this thing that measures what wholesalers get paid. Okay, it went up by about 0.4%. That was more than expected. We're also finding out it's going to cost more, probably, to heat your home this winter. Almost 30% more to heat your home if you have natural gas, according to the Energy Information Administration. One woman telling our Maggie Vespa that with these kind of prices, it'll take the temperature falling below zero for her to turn on the heat on her second floor.
If the weather outside is like below 0 or something, then I have to use the heat on the second floor. They're separate, 2 different units. If the temperature is not that bad, I don't.
She's going to bundle up, right? A lot of people are making those choices with the home heating price so expensive. Everybody also has their eye on what's going to happen tomorrow when this really key inflation indicator comes out called the Consumer Price Index. We've talked about it before. It comes out every so often. It's this time the very last inflation report before the midterms, and it's going to tell us how expensive have things really gotten. Brian Chung is joining us now. And Brian, like, it's the storyline, right? The connective tissue here, high prices on multiple fronts. You've got the midterms right around the corner. There's a lot that is colliding right now as it relates to the economy and politics.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reports that we're seeing today and the report that we'll get tomorrow morning, we don't have the numbers yet, are likely going to tell us something that Americans don't need to be told from the data perspective, which is that things remain very expensive. The question is whether or not, in tandem with the hopefully depressurizing economy alongside the Federal Reserve's efforts to make borrowing costs more expensive, whether or not that picture could be changing soon. It's not going to change by the time we get to the midterms. But as you mentioned, the Producer Price Index telling us that in the month of September, prices remain 8.5% higher than they were a year ago. And that's from the wholesaler's perspective. It's not necessarily reflective of the prices that you pay at the actual cash register. That's going to come from the CPI report that we get tomorrow morning. But broadly speaking, inflation pressures not yet abating. They might be a bit slower than they were in the middle of this summer. But again, nowhere close to the price increases that we saw prior to the pandemic. Not yet.
Let me play just a little bit for you from what the president had to say about the idea of a potential recession. Watch.
I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down slightly. It's possible. I don't anticipate it.
There is space between that, right, and what we are hearing from some in the business community, some of whom suggest we are probably already in a recession, right? How are we supposed to think about squaring that? What are we supposed to take away from these sort of two differing schools of thoughts here?
Well, it seems like the consensus is that a recession is around the corner if we're not already in one. Now, again, if you take a look at the labor market right now, and this is a talking point we've heard from the administration as well, the labor market with 3.5% unemployment, I mean, that is near over 50-year lows, which tells us that people are still getting jobs. So on that side of the coin, we're not quite in a recession. But of course, what you're seeing at the store, price increases outpacing any sort of wage increases, that's not good for Americans, especially as they head towards the polls in a few weeks.
Brian Chung, thank you. Good to see you. To an NBC News exclusive now, where Russia's deputy prime minister is telling us all of President Putin's decisions are made for the good of the Russian people. He talked with our Keir Simmons in Moscow, where he's also responding to President Biden calling Putin a, quote, rational actor. Watch.
President Biden describes President Putin as a rational actor.
Our president makes decisions that are necessary for development and security of our country. And the support for his decisions from the people who live in our country is very high.
The comments coming after President Biden said on CNN that Putin totally miscalculated the conflict with Ukraine.
I think he thought, Jake, he was going to be welcomed with open arms. That this has been the home of Mother Russia in Kyiv, and he was going to be welcomed. And I think he just totally miscalculated.
What we're hearing from the Russian government today is just the latest in this escalating rhetoric between the U.S. and Russia right now. Because Putin today, speaking at an energy forum in Moscow, said the U.S. was most likely behind the Nord Stream pipeline explosions that caused a huge gas leak, allegations that, of course, the U.S. has previously rejected. Keir Simmons is joining us now with his exclusive with the Deputy Prime Minister. And Keir, you know, it would have been perhaps it would have been shocking if the Deputy Prime Minister said Putin was not doing a good job, right? So, of course, he's going to say that Putin is doing a good job here. But it is access to Russian officials right now in Moscow. Tell us more.
Well, that's right, Hallie. You know, in the end, too, it doesn't take a genius to figure out, does it, that President Putin is under a little bit of pressure right now. Just at that forum today, by the way, he spoke for 30 minutes, uncharacteristically short, didn't take any questions. And again, probably not a surprise that the Deputy Prime Minister wasn't giving very much away when I asked him about exactly how President Putin seems to him during these times.
How would you describe his frame of mind right now?
The president, first of all, thinks about the interest of our country and about the interest of people who live in our country.
So no surprise there, Hallie, but he does speak to President Putin very often, so he does know.
Oh, that's a fair point here. You know, one of the things that's also interesting is the discussion right now and the focus right now on the relationship between Russia and Saudi Arabia, especially because, as we've reported here on this show, OPEC Plus recently decided to cut oil production. We know that the White House didn't want that to happen. The president had been trying to make sure that that didn't happen. Talk about how Russia is thinking about building up its relationship with the Saudis when there's this huge concern in the West about what this means for gas prices.
Well, it's interesting that Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak, he's in the room when those negotiations happened. He was the energy minister. He was just recently, in the last few years, promoted by President Putin, so he knows the Saudis very well. He knows how those decisions are made, and that decision has really rocked many lawmakers in the U.S., including the president. That decision to cut by OPEC Plus, to cut the production of oil just when there are challenges with inflation, the possibility of gas prices rising. I wanted to ask him about that too. Take a listen.
President Biden thinks there's an alliance between you and Saudi Arabia. He says there's going to be consequences for Saudi Arabia for what they've done with Russia.
Both Saudi Arabia and Russia are biggest oil producers and exporters in the world. But I want to make it clear that all decisions that are considered and taken in the framework of our cooperation with the 23 countries are taken in a consolidated manner.
Again, Hallie, probably not a surprise that he would not want to get drawn into whether there was politics involved in that decision. But certainly for Saudi Arabia and for Russia, a higher oil price means they make more money.
Keir Simmons, it's great reporting that you're doing there in Moscow. Thank you for being on the ground. Coming up here on the show, a new poll showing Georgia's Senate race pretty close. We're on the ground in Atlanta. We'll talk about how big of an issue abortion is in this election, considering the scandal surrounding Herschel Walker. Plus, why some people say they're ditching Duncan. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the 5 Things. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, we're learning more about the Navy SEAL trainee who died back in February, Kyle Mullen, who died from acute pneumonia and cardiac arrest, according to a military investigation obtained by NBC News. It happened at the end of a really intense part of training known as Hell Week. The investigation detailed how a lack of medical attention delayed Mullen from getting the care he needed after the training. Number 2, Malala Yousafzai visited areas of Pakistan devastated by intense flooding today. It was the second time that Malala, the education activist, Nobel Peace Prize winner, went back to her home country since she was shot by the Taliban a decade ago. She met with victims staying in camps and stressed the need for education and humanitarian help. Number 3, workers at an Amazon fulfillment center in upstate New York started voting today on whether to join the Amazon labor union. They can vote through Monday. If they approve it, if workers vote for it, it's going to be the second Amazon facility in this country to unionize. You remember the first one was on Staten Island back in April. Number 4, kids as young as 5 years old can now get updated COVID boosters that target the Omicron variant. The CDC signed off on that today, not too long after the FDA gave the okay. The agency authorized the Pfizer vaccine for kids 5 to 11, Moderna for kids 6 to 17. Kids can get the shot if it's been at least 2 months since their last COVID vaccine. Number 5, some people running on Dunkin' are not too happy about its new rewards program. People used to get any drink they wanted for free after spending $40. Now it's going to take $70 to earn like an espresso or a cold brew or a crafted drink. And you don't get a free birthday drink anymore. Reddit is ticked off about it. People on the Dunkin' subreddit are saying they're going to ditch the brand now. In a statement to NBC News, Dunkin's president said the change is made for a more dynamic reward system, letting people use their points on more food and drink options. We will see how Dunkin' does. Back here in Washington now, the 9th and potentially last January 6th committee hearing is set for tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Over the summer, the hearings led to some really explosive revelations. And if you're asking yourself, well, wait a minute, I don't quite remember that. Summer feels like an eternity ago, right? How did we get here? Here's your context check. The first and maybe only fall January 6th committee hearing set to begin tomorrow after some big revelations over the summer. On June 9th, the committee kicked things off with shocking footage of the attack on the Capitol. Congresswoman Liz Cheney stepping into the spotlight as one of only 2 Republicans on the panel.
There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
Depositions revealing staff close to former President Trump didn't believe his election fraud lies.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit.
I respect Attorney General Barr, so I accepted what he was saying.
The committee highlighting just how much danger former Vice President Mike Pence was in after he refused to halt the certification of the election. Rioters coming within 40 feet of him as he evacuated. Then Mr. Trump's pressure campaign on government officials taking center stage.
And I said, look, you are asking me to do something that is counter to my oath.
With Mr. Trump allegedly telling Justice Department officials,
what I'm just asking you to do is just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman.
In late June, bombshell testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson describing a confrontation in Mr. Trump's limo the day of the insurrection. She says she heard about it from another White House staffer.
The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now. The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
Mr. Trump, in response, posting on his social media platform that the story was fake and denouncing the committee. In September, the committee interviewed Ginny Thomas, the conservative activist and wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. She had communicated with the White House about efforts to overturn the election, according to copies of messages obtained by the Washington Post. Tomorrow's hearing may be the last before the release of the committee's full report. The hearing is expected to touch on the more than 1 million newly secured Secret Service documents and how former President Trump was alerted of the growing riot that day and did nothing. Sahil Kapoor is joining us now from Capitol Hill. So, Sahil, let's talk about expectations for tomorrow's hearing, because I understand that the committee, some folks close to the committee, don't want it to be framed as a closing argument because they expect that there may be more to come. Not hearings, but information or like revelations.
That's exactly right, Hallie. This is expected to be a broad hearing, unlike previous hearings that were kind of narrow to, specific to a topic or two where 1 or 2 members generally led the panel. This one's going to be different. It's going to be broad. It's going to be a mix of, synthesizing previous information, a lot of what you just played in that excellent package, as well as new information that has come to light to the committee over the last couple of months since it held its hearing. Now, committee aides say that part of the hearing tomorrow is going to be this, kind of broad, big picture focus. One of the things that they're going to zero in on is what a committee aide called Trump's state of mind. What they talked about is his involvement in these events as they unfolded and his, quote, centrality to the scheme, unquote. So they're going to weave together a lot of what they brought in, a lot of new information that they gained. And we also expect them to play some new footage from an upcoming documentary involving Roger Stone, where he appeared to predict the violence. As you mentioned, Ginny Thomas, the conservative activist, recently spoke to this panel, and they may discuss some of her testimony, although it's not quite clear how relevant committee members believe her testimony was to their investigation, given that she stuck by her story of a stolen election. Some members I spoke to after that called it a kooky theory, and that described her as kind of delusional, but that she had a First Amendment right to believe what she wanted to. So we expect the committee to tie up some loose ends, present some new information, and offer this kind of big picture view.
Pull on that thread more about the Secret Service communications, right, and how much that's going to be a factor and the reporting that we have on that, because there's a lot of documents, right? There's a ton of info out there, but it's not exactly info that the committee is, the specific info that the committee wants to see.
Hundreds of thousands of them, in fact. Committee aides say that they've received lots of new information from the Secret Service as part of their investigation, but it's not likely to be those deleted text messages, or rather erased text messages from January 5th and January 6th, which the committee had been very eager to get its hands on. But the Secret Service, as you know, said that was part of a pre-planned migration to a new system, and those messages are gone, cannot be recovered. So the committee is likely to talk about the information that it gained from the Secret Service. Apart from that, which they don't look likely to get their hands on, but could still help put together, a series of, the sequence of events leading up to January 6th and perhaps after January 6th as well.
Sahil Kapoor live for us there on the Hill. I know you're going to have a long and busy day tomorrow, Sahil. Thank you. We will also have a long and busy day, and we hope you join us. I'll see you tomorrow when NBC News Now and NBC News Network have special coverage of the hearing starting at 12:30 Eastern. Do not miss it. When we come back, pop culture icons at the center of a Supreme Court case today, and the outcome could have major copyright implications for anybody who does anything creative, basically. We're going to explain Prince, Andy Warhol, the whole 9 yards. Stay with us. Andy Warhol's portraits of Prince getting more than their 15 minutes of fame today at the Supreme Court. It's a rare moment for the court, right, where two pop culture icons, the photos, the images you see here, were the focus of arguments in a copyright infringement case. You even had one of the justices, Clarence Thomas, saying in court he was a huge Prince fan back in the 80s. Who wasn't, right? So while he's fanning out over Prince, the court's weighing whether Warhol, an artist, infringed on the copyright of a photographer's image of Prince when making his series of signature silkscreen prints, P-R-I-N-T-S here. I know. You saw them on screen. The decision here could maybe affect the value of intellectual property held not just by artists, but movie studios, record labels, book publishers. Ken Delaney is joining us now. And again, this has really big implications for anybody who does anything creative. And the arguments today were interesting. It talked about artists as diverse as Da Vinci, but also Two Live Crew, you know, the rappers, basically. This goes beyond Andy Warhol. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie, far beyond. Here's the backstory. Back in 1981, a famous photographer shot a series of portraits of Prince for Newsweek magazine. And then 2 years later, Vanity Fair magazine hired Andy Warhol to use one of the photos as a reference point for an illustration of Prince to be used in an article. Warhol actually created a set of 16 Prince silkscreens, which he then copyrighted. And the Warhol Foundation has earned hundreds of millions of dollars in profits from these images. And in 2016, Vanity Fair's owner paid the foundation about $10,000 to run one of the images from the Prince series in an issue commemorating the artist's death without giving the photographer any money or credit. So the photographer sued, and a federal district court found that the Warhol series falls under the fair use provision of the copyright law because it conveys a different message from the original image. But the appeals court disagreed, saying that judges, quote, should not assume the role of art critic and seek to ascertain the meaning of the works at issue. So bottom line, if the Supreme Court agrees with the appeals court, the Warhol Foundation will have to pay royalties and possibly damages to the original creator. But as you said, this case goes far, far beyond a money dispute between two artists. Either way, this ruling will have implications for freedom of expression and some say for the nature of art itself. There's a long history of appropriation in art, and a ruling in favor of the photographer will make doing that more dangerous, Hallie.
This is a really big deal, I think, in the art and creative world. You've had 36 in front of the court briefs that have been filed. Like, tons of people have come in saying, here's my argument for why I agree with this side or the other side, right? So, big spotlight. Do we think this is one of those cases that we'll get, like, in June when the justices make that decision, maybe sooner? I know we have no idea. It's a black box, but I'm curious.
I'm told by the experts the ruling could come anywhere from a few months from now to early next year, Hallie.
Awesome. I love the specificity. Ken Delaney, it's a fascinating story. We're showing some of the images now. You know, it's a thorny issue, so we're curious to see what the justices will do. Thank you.
You bet.
Coming up here on the show, breaking news just into us on that L.A. City Council president who has now stepped down after making some racist comments. We'll talk more about the news we're just learning in the last couple of minutes. Plus, the Ohio State Board of Education meeting on proposed federal Title IX guidance. We'll break down what that means for transgender students. And police say a New York woman sold a $10 sweatshirt for $5,000. How? She's accused of running a huge counterfeit scheme and making millions. More on that in the local. Some breaking news into us on a story we've covered here on this show this week. Nury Martinez, she is resigning her seat on the Los Angeles City Council after leaked audio revealed she made racist remarks about the black son of one of her now former colleagues. Martinez had stepped down from her leadership post after these comments became public, reported on by the Los Angeles Times. And it's a local controversy that went national, even reaching President Biden, who said that Martinez should step down. In a statement, she says she's had the honor of helping to uplift working communities in L.A., and is asking for space and privacy. Politics further east now, with the new poll out today showing Senator Raphael Warnock and his Republican opponent, Herschel Walker, are kind of neck and neck in this really important, closely watched Senate race in Georgia. This is according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Georgia News, has Warnock at 46%, Walker at 43%, still inside the margin of error. Now, only a handful of these responses were taken after allegations that Walker, who's running on an anti-abortion platform, paid for an ex-girlfriend's abortion. He has denied those allegations. That, plus a Q poll that is recently out, too, tells us that Walker's standing with female, black, and independent voters was slipping even before this whole controversy started going down. Although, again, fairly flat in the overall race. I think that's what the Q poll showed. Warnock at 52, Walker at 45. If neither candidate ends up pushing above the majority vote mark, we may be looking at a runoff come January. It comes as President Biden is talking about this whole thing, this whole controversy that's going on. Watch.
Into the Herschel Walker controversy in Georgia, do you think Democrats can hold that seat?
Negative and yes.
Ellison Barber is live for us covering this in Atlanta. It's a really important race, Ellison. We've laid it out on the show before. It's one of the races that will help decide control of the Senate come next Congress, right? The polling is interesting because until this point, we really haven't seen hard numbers to quantify how much of an impact this was having on voters. We know it's getting a lot of national attention because Walker has run on an anti-abortion platform. And now these allegations that he paid for an abortion, these allegations that keep coming out that he denies, have been making these headlines. Tell me more about the impact on the ground there.
Look, I mean, it's certainly something that people are paying attention to, people are talking about, right? Like you said, it is in the headlines everywhere, all across the state. There's no question that this is an enormous political story here. That being said, what we see, I think, in a lot of the polls, even coming out post this allegation initially being reported on in the Daily Beast, those two new polls you mentioned today, and even an internal poll that Walker's campaign just acknowledged late this afternoon, where they said they have in their internal polling Walker up, but it was only by about 2%, 2 to 3%, so it's still within that margin of error. But you see just how close this race is, and it doesn't really seem like these allegations, the questions that are being brought up, are moving people who are already decided. One of the big questions throughout this entire election has been this idea of whether or not there are some voters in Georgia who are maybe in the gubernatorial side, somebody who would identify as a Republican, somebody who would plan to vote for Governor Kemp, the Republican incumbent, but then maybe felt uncomfortable about some of the allegations, even before this one related to the abortion, about Walker's past as it related to mental health issues and domestic violence allegations, whether or not they might say, I don't know if they'll feel comfortable here, so I'll lean left, at least for this election. That being said, I mean, I've talked to maybe like two people who identify as one of those split voters, if you will. Most people don't really want to talk about it. So I think what we're seeing in the polling right now reflects how divided this state is. This is a purple state. I grew up here. It was never a purple state when I was a kid, but it very much is now. That being said, I think we've seen a lot of people kind of coalesce around party lines. It has been interesting because you've had the lieutenant governor here sort of back off the gas on Herschel Walker with these latest allegations and say, wait, I have some concerns. But then you have people like national Republicans like Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, Rick Scott, who all came down to campaign on his behalf. And Walker's campaign now saying that after all three of those senators came down and tried to help out, vocally voice their support for him, et cetera, that they had their biggest fundraising day to date, their biggest online fundraising date. They say they raised $450,000 in one day because of that. So it's hard to see where this goes. I do think it's going to be a big issue come Friday when we see Warnock and Walker on the debate stage in Savannah for the first time and probably the only time. Yeah.
First and only. Here's what Walker said before the debate over on ABC overnight. Watch.
So in this current situation, are you saying a flat-out denial to any knowledge of an abortion, or is it possible it happened and you don't remember?
Flat-out denial, lie. Lie.
You know, I think it's important to note here, NBC has not independently confirmed the allegations sort of at the core of this, but there are receipts, basically, literally, actually, that the Daily Beast that first reported this has, a check, a copy of a check that the woman at the center of these allegations said that Herschel Walker gave her, a note, etc. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, what's significant to me about this Washington Post article, there are some allegations or details that are new within it. Like she says that she had multiple conversations with Herschel Walker trying to make him pay her what she says was the money for the abortion that she says they agreed, both of them together, to have. But one of the things that was most interesting to me about this is just the fact that this is the third national news outlet publication saying that they have seen evidence from this woman, the mother of one of Walker's children, as it relates to that check, receipt slips, things like that, that they say confirm aspects of her story. And it's 3 different news outlets now saying this. So even though you had Walker last night adamantly denying it, you still have the story not going away and what appears to be evidence that other outlets are continuing to see, and this woman is continuing to present to people, or at least to reporters. Hallie.
Ellis and Barbara live for us there in Atlanta. I'm sure we'll be talking again, Ellison, for sure on Friday, I would think. Thanks. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Southeast Bureau, San Antonio police say a former officer who shot a teenager while he was sitting in his car eating a burger in a McDonald's parking lot has been arrested and charged on 2 counts of assault. The 17-year-old victim is still on life support. An attorney for his family says he was shot multiple times. The officer was fired last week, just a couple days after the shooting. From our West Coast Bureau, Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Davante Adams has been charged with misdemeanor assault after an image that I think a lot of people have seen, shoving a man to the ground after losing to the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday night. The guy was working as a freelance photographer, filed a police report after, saying he had minor injuries. Adams apologized after the game. He's due in court next month. From our Northeast Bureau, police on Long Island, New York, say a woman's been arrested in an alleged counterfeit scheme. She's accused of making fake Gucci bags, fake Chanel, fake Prada out of this boutique that she owns. She put these labels on cheap clothes and then sold the stuff for something like $40 million. It's a lot of money. She faces a charge of second-degree trademark counterfeiting and could face 3 years behind prison. The boutique was closed yesterday. Our NBC affiliate has reached out for comment. Right now, proposed federal protections for LGBTQ+ students in their schools are being threatened in places like Ohio, where the Board of Education is set to vote on a resolution that declares a person's sex an unchangeable fact, saying that denying the reality of biological sex destroys foundational truths upon which education rests and irreparably damages children. This resolution asks school districts not to comply with some proposed new federal regulations under Title IX that would give more protections to trans students. Like it would require students to be addressed by their preferred pronouns. It would let them use bathrooms that match their gender identity. Sam Brock is joining us here now. And Sam, this is a very sort of visible push by a school board. We talk a lot about sort of school board politics, what it means on the local level. Again, something that the federal administration, the Biden administration, is trying to do.
You have to think that the Biden administration knew going into this, Hallie, that they were going to change the classifications and the protections under Title IX to include LGBTQ students and transgender students in this political climate, that it would ignite a firestorm. And that is exactly what has played out. That includes in the state of Ohio right now. We've seen for hours there were comments, I'm told some of them pretty difficult to digest, about why those students should not be protected. But the reality is, what's this actually going to achieve, assuming this resolution is passed? And the answer is a few things. It's really symbolic. Basically, they're going to send out a letter to all of the schools throughout the state of Ohio, be it elementary, middle, or high school, to tell them, you don't need to abide by these protections. They're out there, but you are not obligated to actually follow them. It is also going to lend its support to the 21 state attorneys general plus Ohio that has filed a class action against the Biden administration to say changing these classifications for Title IX, which protects against sex discrimination, is unconstitutional. So you have that element as well. And then the state is also asking legislators to backstop funding for those schools who choose not to abide by these new standards, that they will at least have funding, federal funding, for things like subsidized meals, so that money continues to flow, even though they are trying to essentially contradict the federal order here.
It's not just Ohio, Sam, as you point out, right? This is happening everywhere. And I want to play a piece of video from Arkansas, because what we saw in the last 24 hours was a school board there just last night voting unanimously to put new regulations on bathroom use, overnight school trips. And somebody at this meeting said that LGBTQ+ students deserve death, it sounded like. I want to play this.
God gave them over to a depraved mind so that they do what they should not be done, that those who do such things deserve death.
The extreme, even dangerous rhetoric here is happening, and we're seeing it in places like Texas and Florida, where you are school districts taking a federal issue, or I should say the conflict between the local and federal sort of entities here on what's best for kids in schools.
We sat here a month ago, I think, and you and I talked about the book bans in Texas.
That's right.
The issues here in Florida as well, one of the first states to ban transgender athletes from participating in sports where they identify with that particular gender. And look, I'm looking at the original copy of this Ohio resolution right now, Hallie. It mentions religion. That's striked out in lines. They went through a bunch of different revisions on this document, but God and religion were at the front and center of the official document from the state. What you're seeing right now at the school board level throughout the country is this sort of culture clash going on that incorporates all of these different themes, and it's playing out in real time in Florida, in Texas, in Arkansas, primarily all throughout the state and all throughout the South, but it's happening across the country, Hallie.
Sam Brock, thank you so much for that reporting. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the show, what happens when women lead and what can we learn from it? We're getting into it with our friend Julia Boorstin, whose new book about it is out in our backstory tonight. That's next. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And, you know, earlier in the show, we talked about what inflation means, not just on politics, right, but on all of you, Americans. We're all thinking about what's happening with our money, what's happening with the economy. Businesses are thinking about it, too. So let's talk about some of those businesses. Who leads those companies? Most of those leaders are men, right? Women only make up about 8% of Fortune 500 CEOs. And last year, women founders only got about 2% of the venture capital funding in this country. CNBC's Julia Boorstin talked to a whole bunch of female CEOs and leaders for her new book. You see it on screen, When Women Lead. And in these conversations, Julia says she found out just how much unconscious bias there is from venture capitalists who kind of just want to finance people like Mark Zuckerberg, right? So she lays out some of the key steps these women followed to get to where they are, leading with empathy, embracing change, creating new communities, for example. Julia is joining us now to talk about her new book. Julia, hello, and a huge congratulations, my friend.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Listen, I am so amazed at you always when we cross paths, when we're traveling around the country, because you're working your crusher job at CNBC. You cover all this crazy stuff in media and tech. You're also full-time, you know, you raise your kids. You wrote this book during the pandemic on top of all that. How did you do it? Is it something you've been wanting to do for a while? How did the idea come together? And how did you think, yeah, let me take this on at a time when you're already doing so much?
So, Hallie, I've been so lucky to interview literally thousands of CEOs and leaders in my 20-plus years as a journalist, 16 years at CNBC. And I've always been so inspired, not just by the CEOs, by the entrepreneurs in particular. And the more I interviewed the women and I saw the way they had defied these crazy odds, I thought their stories are so inspiring. And the ways in which they're succeeding are so different from this traditional archetype of leadership. I thought the world needs to know these stories. The world needs to know that there are different ways to succeed than the traditional, more traditionally male way of leading, running a company, starting a company. So I knew if I could get those stories out there, that people would find in themselves some of those same traits that have been so effective for some of the CEOs I profile in my book.
You talk about interviewing hundreds, thousands of them. How do you make those connections? You've worked with so many people in the industry. Talk about how you got them to open up to you about their careers, because some of this stuff is easy to talk about, but some of the stuff you write about, it's vulnerable and it's personal, and it may not be that easy to discuss.
Totally personal. But you know what? I think working on this book during the pandemic gave me a huge advantage. Everyone was at home, so they were accessible. Everyone I reached out to was so gracious, and they were open to talking about their careers and their path. And a lot of times that was because they wanted to make sure that the next generation, the next round of women that wanted to start a company, or anyone that was just trying to succeed in the workplace, would have an easier go of it than they did. So they wanted to tell their stories. But also everyone was at home, so they could talk to me on Zoom. And I found that people were really reflective. Everyone had a moment to take a step back from the day-to-day because the pandemic changed the world so much. And they were thinking, why am I leading the way I am? Why does my company matter so much to me? How do I want to change the world? And that's why I got to really have those vulnerable conversations.
It's also in a sector that has historically largely been dominated by men. And your book talks about some of the unfair criticism that women get who are in the business world or who cover, Julia, the business world. Because you wrote about the time that this male executive told you sounded mean after an interview, right? Like, how do you navigate some of that? Like or sometimes what I've experienced in my own life, like benevolent misogyny, if you will.
Yes, I mean, mean. I'm not mean, I'm fair. So I was so surprised by that criticism. And what I realized realized in that moment that I just read all of these studies about how women are expected to be nurturing all the time, especially in professional situations. And I certainly didn't seem to be exhibiting nurturing or warmth in that interview that I was doing. But so that's why that guy gave me that criticism. Women are also far more likely to be judged on their style rather than their substance. So I said something to him. I said, would you have said the same thing to one of my male colleagues? It very much caught him off guard, and he said, I'll have to think about it. So I was armed with the data. When you're prepared, when you know what you're up against, it's much easier to fight it.
Did anything surprise you as a takeaway that you learned from this book? Was there anything that you went, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have thought this would have been like this?
So many things. The main one is that we all have traits that we might think of as flaws, but they actually can be superpowers in business. And the more we're authentic to who we are and lead in ways that are true to our own strengths, then you're more likely to succeed.
Julia Boorstin, I'm so excited for you to have this book out, for us to be able to talk about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hallie.
I deeply appreciate you being on, friend. Listen, be true to yourself, man. That's it, right? That's it. We'll leave you with those words because that does it for us this hour. We're going to have more for you here tomorrow. Same time, same place. I'll see you for that January 6th coverage. Special time, actually. Different place, New York. Tune in. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.